You know, sometimes a movie comes along that seems like it just can't miss. A star director, a classic story, tons of hype. But then it does. So what happened with The Running Man? Let's get into it.
I mean, seriously, just look at this lineup. An A-list director, a Stephen King classic, and it ends up a box office bomb? How does that even happen? This was supposed to be a surefire hit, a total slam dunk. So how did it become this, well, this case study in disappointment? That's exactly what we're going to unpack.
All right, first up, the promised thriller. And you gotta understand, before this thing came out, the buzz was absolutely electric. People weren't just hopeful, it felt like a done deal. Everyone was basically convinced we were about to get a modern classic.
And the hype made perfect sense. It was like a perfect storm of awesome. You've got Edgar Wright, right? You know his style is going to be incredible. Then you have the promise of a faithful, fresh take on the Stephen King novel. You throw in a super compelling lead like Glenn Powell and the potential for a really visceral, R-rated ride. I mean, on paper, this thing was absolutely flawless. So you have to ask, what could possibly go wrong?
And that sentiment was everywhere. Like, this review package called it a highly anticipated and potentially definitive dystopian thriller. The verdict was pretty much in before a single ticket was sold. This wasn't just a movie, it was being sold as a can't-miss cinematic event.
Okay, so let's move on to the critical reception, because this is where the first signs of trouble started to appear. The movie drops, the reviews start coming in, and that universal praise everyone expected? Yeah, that didn't happen. Not even close. The cracks were definitely starting to show.
So what we got was this really divided response. On one hand, critics praised all the stuff you'd expect. The stylish visuals, some key performances, those awesome fluid action sequences, classic Edgar Wright. But, and this is a big but, they also hammered it for some huge problems. We're talking rushed pacing, a weak emotional core, and a fudged anticlimactic ending. Ouch.
And this quote from Peter Bradshaw at The Guardian just nails that feeling perfectly. Likeable and fun, though never actually disturbing in the way that it's surely supposed to be. See, it was entertaining, for sure, but it never got under your skin. It never felt dangerous. The fun part actually seemed to cancel out the dystopian thriller part.
And you know, it wasn't just the story structure. The film's politics also drew some really pointed criticism.
Yeah, some critics found its message a little too on the nose. Take this quote from Peter Suderman at Reason Magazine, a shallow, socialist action fantasy, a dystopian action cartoon for the Bernie Bros set. Whoa! They basically called it a cartoon, arguing the characters were just there to spout themey declarations instead of, having actual conversation.
Okay, so critics were split down the middle. But what about the audience reaction? What did the viewers actually have to say? Because honestly, this is where the picture of what went wrong gets a whole lot clearer. Check out this comment from a user on Reddit. They said, "This movie comes to an absolute screeching halt after Glenn Powell gets on that highway." And you know what? A lot of people felt that. It's like the story just hit a wall and lost all its momentum, and it never really got it back.
And here's the really ironic part. Another Reddit user pointed this out. It felt like he wanted everything from the book in the movie, but everything felt rushed because of it. So the thing that was supposed to be its greatest strength, being faithful to the novel, ended up being a huge weakness. It just felt overstuffed and underdeveloped at the same time.
But maybe the most brutal feedback came from Edgar Wright's own fans. This user said it felt, quote, sloppy for Edgar Wright, who is known for having the sharpest, most meticulous editing/style around. And man, that's gotta sting. When your biggest fans are calling your work sloppy, that is a massive red flag.
All right, let's get into the anatomy of this misfire. When you put all this feedback together from both critics and audiences, you start to see a really clear pattern. Let's pinpoint the key issues.
So there seem to be 4 key failings here. Number 1, a tonal imbalance. The film was too fun for its own grim dystopian message. They just didn't mix. Number 2, pacing and script. Everyone seemed to agree it felt rushed and way too on the nose, with characters just spelling out the themes. Number 3, failed setups. Viewers caught some pretty clumsy writing, like a whole plot point about a kid's sock that was set up and then just forgotten. And finally, number 4, the world building was a mess. It had this 80s vibe, but then there were these random floating cameras and giant smartphones that just felt totally out of place. It was like a snowball effect of problems.
Okay, so let's look at the final numbers. We've talked about feelings and opinions, but the data? Well, the data tells the ultimate story.
Take its Rotten Tomatoes score, 63%.
That officially puts it in the mixed or average reviews category. It's not a complete disaster, but for a movie with this much hype, it's a huge disappointment. Definitely not certified fresh.
And it's the same story over on Metacritic, a score of 56. Again, this just confirms that mixed or average verdict. It shows you just how divided critics were. For every positive review, there was a negative one to match it.
But here's the real kicker, the financial verdict. The movie had a budget of $110 million, and its worldwide box office, just $68.6 million. There's just no way to sugarcoat that. That is a straight-up, certified box office bomb. It didn't even come close to making its money back.
So, what's the takeaway here? You've got a film with a perfect recipe, but it ends up being a half-baked product. I think it's a huge reminder that in filmmaking, execution is absolutely everything. You can have all the right ingredients, a great director, a classic book, a fantastic star, but if the basic storytelling isn't there, if the pacing and the tone are off, even the most surefire hit can completely fall apart.